I'll give you a hand. I've seen a few intravenous drips in my time.
Is it bad if I don't know what pathogen is?
That's what I was thinking. What's so simple?
Thought I discovered an alien planet on my own.
Chat.
Better written.
Pillar of Hope.
Better written. Very cliche. Better written.
Pillar of Hope.
Better written. Very cliche. But I still felt that story was fairly boring.
That's all this series.
You don't even have to watch it in order.
Better written. Very cliche.
Who cares about Doctor Who, Series 12, Episode 6, Praxeus? This episode was co-written. Now Series 12 has fallen into this trend of showrunner Chris Chibnall co-writing all the remaining episodes by Pete McTighe, the rising star of Doctor Who, and I'd say the TV world in general. Writer of DVD booklets, Ace minisodes, and last season's very provocative Kablam. Peering into the plastic this week will be myself, Ingiga from England, as well as Neo from Australia, and two welcome newcomers. We've got Ford from Ireland and Hot Rod Cow from England. Let's start with Ford. Ford, before actually seeing this episode, what did you expect exactly from it?
Well, I saw that Chris Chibnall was co-writing it, last week. So I was thinking it would be, an interesting car crash, like last week, rather than a sort of bland Series 11 style episode. But I tried to give it a fair chance and not go into it thinking it was going to be terrible.
That seems to be a bit of a thing, isn't it? Like an episode in Series 12, it's either going to be a chaotic kind of clusterfuck, Spyfall 2 or Orphan 55 or Fugitive, or it's going to be kind of trad and kind of sort of unsurprising in that sense. There's no middle way.
Yeah, it's either like a car crash or like a car.
Yeah, car, basically.
Yeah, colour me disappointed.
Were you not a fan, Hot Rod Cow?
Yeah, what did you expect, Hot Rod?
Well... Yeah, I'd say that sigh is a bit indicative. So I haven't actually seen Kablam yet. I only know it by its reputation, and
wow,
yeah,
it's very interesting.
Yeah, and so yeah, I definitely went into this expecting something I could at least get my teeth into, even if that was, to draw blood.
Yeah.
Can we ask? What's with the reticence to watch Kablam?
That's mostly because I basically gave up with season 11 after Arachnids. I wasn't feeling the best at the time, but
because of those 4 episodes, right?
Yeah, I only rejoined that season just to watch Ravscore, just because I expected it to be terrible, and I was happy to be vindicated in that case. And I also checked in on Resolution because I wanted to see how it would try handling some of the more, as you say, trad elements of the show. And I was very distressed to find out that it was a story I'd written when I was 3. Yeah, I really have no interest in rewatching any of these episodes.
I think this is an example of an episode that does not serve rewatches that well, because once you don't have that element of suspense over wondering how it might go, there's not a great deal left over exactly, because I think the characters spend so much time relaying the story to you instead of giving you anything more, anything meatier, that you're not left with that much to talk about, are you?
Yeah, it's amazing how much my emotions fell. Beforehand, I was expecting Sea Devils and a very thorny McTighe-esque pro-pollution kind of stance, just from, unreliable spoiler hounds and the like that swim around this show. I was expecting something very in Kablam style, so Hot Rod could be, disappointed like we were with that. But yeah, it was a decidedly just kind of workmanlike affair. And with these 2 writers, that was the last thing I was expecting.
It felt very similar to a lot of network television I've seen.
Oh, can you give some examples of shows that it's similar to? Is it a procedural sort of thing?
Yeah, it was Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which is
right.
Which is also in that, cast in that procedural style.
But we're trying to compete with those CW shows, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the great Netflix shows, all the great Hulu shows. Well, we've all seen Resolution, we said, and in commonality with that was the narration that bookended it. What did you think of that?
I'd forgotten, to be honest.
I'm not sure why Chibnall has developed such a fascination with putting narration at the start and end of episodes. It's just this weird tick he has now. Like, I'm pretty sure that was a Chibnall edition rather than a McTighe original, because you've got Cold Blood, you've got Resolution, and now this too. I wonder, does he think it makes things more profound? Because it just feels very tacked on here. Like, what's she talking about? Oh, human life is connected from the atmosphere to the depths of the sea, and it's all very wishy-washy, and I think it is trying to instill some sense of oneness with the universe or whatever, but it's just I'm tiring a lot of these global thrillers that we're getting between this and Spyfall and like the first 60 seconds of Resolution. The show is so indulgent in the sense of, oh, we're going around the whole planet, or everything is connected, but you get stuff that just feels very bitty and very distracted and all over the place rather than really getting its teeth into any one element.
Yeah, after watching the episode, I was thinking it might have been better if it had all been set in one country or something, but then I realised if you take out all the shuffling back and forth from locations, there's not much left. I think he was trying to keep audiences interested by, Gabriella's in Peru, but now she's in Moscow with Yaz, and now Ryan's in Madagascar, and like. Yeah,
it does. A lot of Chib Who does feel like it's it throws a lot of stuff in just to make itself seem more not even important but poignant.
Yeah,
I would have preferred more on the plastics and the pollution and the microfiltration, which I felt like were kind of more almost in passing than anything else, but I don't really know what the tangible thing here was then.
It was totally throwaway. See, after Orphan 55, I think everyone was pretty sensibly expecting some kind of pollution themed messaging episode, or at least for that to be worked in some way, and we got a very throwaway take on that, which kind of backed out from really making a real point, because obviously you've got the Doctor noting that there's plastic everywhere and there's plastic inside us, microplastics, but the threat of that is apparently not that, we're going to destroy the planet or the environment or anything, but rather that an alien bacteria might show up and take over the plastic. It's such a weird angle to come at this from. We don't even get fighting the big polluters or anything like that. It's the antagonist to some scientist from another planet who's trying to cure the disease. It's a case of something that happens very often in Chibnall Who, I think, where the elements don't really speak to each other a great deal.
It's like 13 says, you're poisoning yourself as well as this planet. So our just punishment was alien. People were calling her an activist. Does that really map on to what she was at all? She seemed like a scientist.
Well, I know. At least her cover story on Earth, Suki Cheng's for that, her cover story at least was she was working on the water filtration system and trying to get rid of the plastic or whatever in I don't know. But I think, I wouldn't say she was an activist per se, but certainly they basically, there was a sympathetic idea there, which is that she wants to cure the disease, but she's presented as like a sort of amoral scientist using Earth as like a lab to, experiment with these diseases, and quite amorally using human research subjects like Adam. So it wasn't so much an activist bad thing as it was just like a
scientist bad.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Yeah, it was. I'm really not sure. I don't think. Well, I think it's usually the wrong tack to assume there's any kind of broader statement at work. I saw an interesting read on Twitter, which was that the character of Suki Cheng, that there was kind of an uncomfortable, probably unintentional element of kind of xenophobia in there, like this stereotype of dangerous viruses and diseases generating from like East Asian sources, and like Suki Cheng like representing like the sort of like the whole kind of not just coronavirus, but kind of this whole like cliche there. Like I don't know if that's like a big thing, but
she's also a very smart East Asian who can't be trusted apparently.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not exactly a knock out of the park for East Asian representation in Doctor Who, but then, what is? I mean, the last we had was Dr. Chang.
Didn't this get its episode order switched? Because it didn't really help it in terms of the timeliness.
Oh, yeah. If this was like a Robot of Sherwood situation, would they have like shut the episode down because it is transmitting at the wrong time based on current global events? But if we're gonna, Neo, should I bring up the other virus thing, or should I wait a bit to bring that up? Okay. So one of the other hot takes around this episode is that it's a positive sort of hot take, and basically to try and lay this out, it's some people were observing that the episode makes the decision to make a couple of gay men the driving force of the narrative in an episode about a mysterious and deadly virus. And apparently the subtext involved with that would seem to elevate this episode into the higher realms of subtext and interplay meanings in Doctor Who. And apparently this is a really great kind of episode dealing with queer masculinity. Hearing that, what do you guys think? The silence is killing me.
I guarantee if there's one piece of criticism that Chris Chibnall absorbed from season 11, it would have been about he let them live till the end of the episode.
Yeah. We've alluded to that, don't you worry. Yeah, we've very much observed the trend of gay deaths in Chibnall Who.
That had the interesting effect, though, of being completely engaged by like the climax and being, on the edge of one's seat and really buying into the stakes of it, because in this world we totally believe that those characters are very, very, very likely to die. And so like on any other show I would just assume that, because it's a family show, that the day will be saved and everyone will be fine. But on this I was like 99% sure that he's really not going to make it. So that was one way to get me really paying attention.
It's a good way of doing the tension in a weird kind of way, because I was expecting at least one of them to die, and for most of the episode you think it's the astronaut, and then suddenly it's the husband that's going to die. So the whole time I was thinking someone's going to die, and in a way it just kind of worked for tension. I mean, it shouldn't have, though.
Yeah, it's for all the wrong reasons.
All of 2018 was just to set up the tension working in this one.
I do suspect it was a response, though. I do think they had it in mind.
Do you think there was an earlier draft where like the husband died or something, but then they looked at it and they were like, oh my god, guys, we haven't let any gay people live. We need to save them. And that's when you get the Doctor just, bounding in at the last second. This is really bad of me, but the whole episode, I was low-key kind of hoping that Chibnall would keep up his trend of killing the gays just so we could keep making fun of him for it. So when, the Doctor, rushed in to save Jake, I was like, damn it! Just wanted Chibnall to keep fucking up for one day, But yeah, no, it was nice that happened, I suppose. But, I'm kind of thinking, certainly on rewatch, it strikes me that that whole element with the gay couple, it seems like that's the part that they really tried to make the emotional core of the episode and the story. And it struck me that with that being the case, there's so much extraneous shit in there that just distracts from it, and it's really frustrating. I think like an episode that just solidly treated them as the center and kind of worked them into the story in a way that felt more natural and wasn't constantly jumping about the place. I think that could have maybe worked quite decently. But, it's just like everything in Chibnall Who, it's just kind of undercooked.
I think that reaction of you wanting them not to survive is super, super fascinating, because I don't think you would have had that last season, because I think back then there wasn't as much of a cynicism or feeling righteous and justified by our cynicism yet. And I think a lot of it's borne on by feeling the need to assert the validity of this more kind of cynical stance to it, where we see last week, the hordes of white people talking about how Ruth is the most woke and hugest representation and most meaningful big move that could be made. And when, we outlined the reasons why that's silly. And then this week to see people praise and be so satisfied with these two people not dying. And it's it wasn't that many years ago we had Bill.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's feasting on scraps and holding them up like a feast. And so I don't think any of us intrinsically want those characters to die so much, but it's these are paper thin people, and we kind of want to feel validated in a stance of, no, this is crap and this is, I hate it, it's evil, as 12 would say.
Yeah.
So it's just very fascinating to like hear gay men champion that trope.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a morbid kind of hate fetish for Chibnall Sue in general. I should not be treated as an example of the general population.
I also think it's incongruent how he was saved, and this is another reeling it feels cheap and why our types are kind of primed to scowl at it a bit, is because in the other environmentalist episode this season, Orphan 55, at the end, like the main side characters are just left to die when the Doc could have easily materialized around them and saved them the exact way she did to this guy, the astronaut's husband, this episode. And so it's just like the incoherency and inconsistency typical of this era, which, it gives rise to many an eye roll.
I mean, it's Adric all over again, isn't it? I feel like as soon as you get into that point of the Doctor can just, pop in and just materialize anywhere and save anyone, you start kind of, I think it's not so much the problem that the Doctor saves a character or whatever, but rather when that's not so much worked into the plot as it is just worked into the TARDIS being, the magic box, you start to run into problems. I think stuff starts to feel contrived and a bit cheap, and that's it. Yeah, it's a bit of like a, a bit of a overly, I don't know, what's the bloody word? Saccharine, that's it, saccharine.
Yeah, and I find it hard to even like feel or let alone celebrate any like value of life moves in this episode when we had like Gabriella instantly get over her friend or girlfriend possibly, and then we had what's his name, Aramu, completely forgotten at the end. It's like, I can't, like, how can you take like earnestly and sincerely like the relationship or like the value of these guys' lives when it's so clear that the script doesn't think of life in that life in that way in general, like they're so disposable.
It's probably not a good sign if your episode has so many characters you forget about one of them entirely. Seriously, we need to remember the Aramu, he just, he stayed outside to watch the birds and then they just, set upon him and no one even acknowledged it had happened. Oh dear.
I was genuinely laughing at Gabriella for the wrong reasons whenever there was a few scenes of her rapidly switching between funny Instagram Gabriella and grieving Gabriella, and then it settled on the funny one. But there was a few scenes where genuinely she switched over and over.
Yeah, like at the end she's just completely forgotten, or even I've forgotten the name of her partner, and she's just happy
Jamila?
to be off. Yeah, and she's happy to be off with a random couple she's like just met.
I think she's going to be doing some voyeurism.
I wouldn't be surprised if there was anyone else in there that we've forgotten about.
Was there just a Pete character who's just disappeared from our memories?
Something else I find interesting, and you can look at this a lot in earlier episodes as well, is the, how to put this, the infantilization of Ryan. Like here it was him not knowing what a pathogen was. And this era started with him trying to learn a bike, and then a few episodes earlier he kept sucking his thumb. And this character's meant to be 19, and the actor really does not look 19. And his arc last season was, fighting with his, adopted parental figure. Like it's like this character feels like he should be Adric's age or something. Like it's so weird that he's meant to be an adult.
To be fair, Ryan did get possibly his best line ever in this episode, which was when Graham said he wasn't full of plastic, and Ryan was like, "You're full of something." That made me laugh. Or at least it made me laugh on rewatch when I actually noticed he'd said it. I think with the companions in general, this episode seems to be really pushing home the idea of splitting them up and the Doctor sending them off on independent missions in different locations around the globe. And I think that's meant to signify some sort of character arc, like they're more independent, they're capable of taking charge. But it's, nonetheless, I find it's not so much, it's not really becoming like a Clara thing where we're seeing them become more competent or more intelligent. They're just doing things, and the Doctor doesn't need to be there, really, and they're not really providing any much in the way of unique insights either. Although with Yaz's plotline in this episode, they were getting almost self-aware about that, weren't they? Like Yaz was insisting on going off on her own and doing this and that and whining when she couldn't discover a new planet. It's like they got self-aware about how useless Yaz has been.
Yeah, I was near fainting when she had motivation and she wanted to do something and she disagreed with 13 over it.
It was a very random thing to disagree with 13 about, and she's like, no, I'm gonna go back in there on my own to get some doohickey. it was just, yeah, I feel a lot of these little conflicts, they feel quite contrived, I think.
What I think's going on with Yaz, or what I hope, what I suspect there may be an infinitesimal chance of is, so last week we got Jack back, and as usual, Barrowman, ever since 2011, he's always been talking to anyone who will listen, and that's not many, but he will talk to anyone who is trying to get Torchwood back on the air. And he used to bag out Stephen Moffat saying he was blocking it happening, and a very taken aback and annoyed Moffat was like, "What are you talking about? No, I'm not." And then he's been emailing Chibnall about it for years at this point, trying to get the show back. He's been having meetings with American studios like CW, like we mentioned earlier, saying you guys should buy the rights to the show and make it and stuff. And he doesn't own the show or anything. He's just going around of his own volition doing this. So he's very enthusiastic, shall we say. But what recent bits of information have been piling up? Besides that, we've been getting, a round of articles about, Barrowman's been trying to do this, which is more press than it usually gets. And we've also had, there's some kind of con that it sounds like the original Torchwood cast are all going too soon. And Gareth David Lloyd, the actor for Yanto, has been tweeting vague, very excited, positive things lately. There's all sorts of things like that. And what does that lead you guys to think?
Absolutely nothing at all.
Well, what some people are thinking is that there's going to be a revival of televised Torchwood, Series 5 on television, and that's what this is all pointing to. And then some people think Yaz's little arc of resisting 13, or even in her first episode last season, where she said I want to achieve my own things, I want to go off and excel, is her being part of a space cops almost. Torchwood itself could be the natural end or next stage for her character. I don't sound that enthusiastic about this, but some people are.
And she could be the new Gwen. Gwen started as a cop as well, and she went into Torchwood. Also, you've got Twitter afire with demands for Yaz to join Torchwood, and it's, some people were saying that the three randoms at the end of this episode might go off and form the new Torchwood as well, which, Yeah,
it's a backdoor pilot.
Yeah, I mean, it would explain why the gay couple survived the episode, because Chibnall's waiting to kill them off in Torchwood instead, but I think can you imagine Yaz on Torchwood? Can you? Really? At all?
Seems like they're from different universes. It would be like putting Torchwood in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe or something.
Yeah, it'd be like putting Torchwood in the Sarah Jane Adventures, basically. Although, admittedly, I have always advocated for Clyde and Rani to be aged up and join the Torchwood audios, because I'm a sick motherfucker, right? But anyway, I do think Yaz, Series 11 characters, they don't have enough even inner conflict to be on Torchwood at all. Even when Martha came on Torchwood, something was a bit incongruous about that. She didn't quite feel she was operating on the same level as the others. It was it felt out of place. So this weirdness of insisting that Yaz joined Torchwood, I have concerns.
You're really selling me on the idea.
It's weird. I'm a huge fan of Torchwood, a huge fan. That's why we did 6 big discussions about it, all the seasons, even the audio Big Finish ones. Huge fan of the show, but it had 4 seasons. It had 2 regular ones, then I had a huge masterwork, really good, very acclaimed one. Then I had the very quirky, offbeat American one. That's a lot of content. No one's been robbed here. This isn't a situation of a show being cut off at its knees halfway through its first season's run and never meeting its potential. It got its time. It got to do what it could do on TV. And then it's lived on, in the little extended universe ways. So most big fans like myself are content with the kind of stories we get now in whatever medium they may be.
Yeah, but John Barrowman needs purpose in his life, so...
He needs more stuff to do. He needs to show his face, which he can't really do recording audio dramas, that's true. But it's A Miracle Day was 2011. It's 9 years later. So it would be a revival TV show, and don't you just groan thinking of that? Eve Miles is probably too busy with all the work she does now to join it. Can you even imagine Torchwood without Gwen?
If it is the original cast, it would be a reboot as well, surely?
I think soft reboot would be eminently doable, because Jack can always be used. Gwen will be written off because of Eve, presumably. Yaz will be there. Like...
There. She'll be there.
I don't even want to, like, spend more words on this because the prospect is, like, deadening me so much. It's not something I want. Is it something that could happen, though? Like, do you think this is just, like, a fear or a dream of people, or is it something actually feasible?
I think it is probably just a weird fantasy, and I pray to whatever may exist that there is not in our future. Like, dear God, you know, this whole revival fad is like pure cancer, and we do not need Torchwood succumbing to it. Like, I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure Torchwood. I just did a quick count in my head. I'm pretty sure Torchwood had more episodes than the Capaldi era of Doctor Who. Like, yeah, that's a show. That's a completed show. We don't need endless rehashes of it. Oh God, help me.
I think that's a really interesting thing. I don't think this attitude would have been as common a decade ago, let alone more. This kind of thing is saying we've had enough content, we don't want more content. And you can even see it now with, like, people are, like, saying this mothership show should be put on hiatus. You know, now they're saying we're so dissatisfied with the state of things right now that we don't want it anymore, make it go away for a while.
Yeah. If I recall, Andrew Ellard observed that we've gone to the inverse of the 80s. So back then we had Doctor in Distress, like, bring the show back now, we demand it. And now it's like the opposite of that. Please stop making this. Please, we've had enough.
And that's so interesting, like, why, like, fandom culture or, like, audiences have changed in that way. Why do you think people act like that now where no one was doing that in 86 in the first gap year?
Well, in 1986... most people probably didn't even have VHS, whereas now we've got Netflix and everything. So I think we just got this idea that everything that existed before, it still exists. We can still go back and watch it. But back then, if a show was cancelled, you might never be able to see it again, or that was the idea in your head.
That's a very good point, yeah. But I feel like even 10 years ago, like, DVDs, people still weren't quite this, please don't make any more, like, please stop now. Is it just, like, saturation of content, like there's so many shows and things around now, or is it people have just, like, cannier with, like, saying we don't want things changed so much, we would rather get less and it be the way we wanted, or is it something else?
I think we've had a decade for stuff to lose its novelty because it's been dragged out so much. Like, a decade ago, both Doctor Who and Torchwood were newer, relatively, than they are today, right? People have had time to get sick of this shit.
Yeah, I'd definitely put it up to fatigue. I mean, as you can tell, I'm not exactly charmed at the moment. There's
definitely more sci-fi shows now as well than there were 10 years ago.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, just generally, it's peak content, isn't it? I mean, we've got a glut of everything everywhere, and we've got all the archives. Like, you know, I think people are increasingly getting the sense that they don't need, like, this endless deluge of stuff. But, you know, you've still got plenty of consumers keeping it all afloat. Right, consume next product.
I think there's a certain serenity to having something complete, and, like, even its flaws you've, like, reckoned with or you've accepted, and there being no anxiety or stress that new ones might ever arise. Like, Firefly is done. Like, you never need to worry that, you know, a character might be flanderized or a character might be written off or something in one episode. You never need to worry about that. You know, for all it's been cut short, it's finished. You can be satisfied with, like, what's came. You never have to worry about the show again. You know what I mean? But, like, when things go on, like, we all thought this era, you know, couldn't taint the past ones, because how could it? It would be doing new stories, and then, you know, and that's how it was last season. But then this season, it's like we're saying they can actually go back and, you know, touch past things in a way. Like, I know they can't really go back to 2017 or anything, but they can certainly try and superimpose themselves over past decades, and that's very uncomfortable. So there's, like, a purity to things ending in that you don't need to worry about them again. Does that make sense?
From the sound of it, are you advocating for climate extinction?
This and Orphan 55, the environmentalist themes, that's what they've driven me to. I hope that was the intended effect.
I thought the director did a good job this episode. Just to, you know, randomly loop it back onto the ep. You know, I thought it was one of the better looking Chib episodes, and some decent editing as well. Like at the start when we had the cut from the space shuttle crashing to Jake crashing through a stack of bottles and stuff. Generally, I think it always stands out a bit when a Chib era episode is actually competently made, because I think it's very common for them to look glitzy and cinematic, but maybe less common for them to actually be well put together as television.
I think I generally enjoy the aesthetic and visuals of this era more than most people that come on here. But yeah, I agree, this looked better than normal. There was nice location shooting. There were a lot of, like, blues and purples and just more brightness in general, which I guess, you know, that's nice.
Speaking of how stuff is put together as television, something I've noticed about this episode is that it's not unique to this episode either, but it's very obvious when you've got plot scenes and when you've got character scenes. Like, they're incredibly delineated as separate from each other. Rather than getting, like, plot and character to kind of weave together and work together and progress each other at the same time, like you might get in, you know, a Moffat script, or really a script by, you know, or Jamie Matheson, you know, he's really good at that as well. You basically get plot, and then we stop dead for a minute or two or a couple of minutes for the characters to talk about their feelings in a way that is often quite circumspect and kind of mumbly and kind of, you know, lacking in momentum, where sort of the gravity of the narrative kind of drops out so that you can get a bit of insight into this character or that character. And I think it's maybe more of a problem than it seems to be, because I think that whole approach to stuff, I think it kind of fatigues people. Like, I've seen, like, personally, I wouldn't say I don't particularly love this ep, but I don't feel like visceral hatred towards it, but some people really fucking hated it, right? And I think this whole style of just, like, the characters just being, like, motor-mouth exposition machines, then stopping to have feelings, and then going back to being, you know, motor mouths. I think it really kills people's interest in the stakes of an episode. I think it really annoys people.
I feel like in past eras, you'd have things like Ten and Martha on the run from, you know, some creature, and Ten would make some Rose loved running, you know, comment, and Martha would, like, look crestfallen, and like, we got a characterization point through that. Or 12 and Clara would be trapped somewhere, and 12 would say, "Oh, I wish Amy was here with her long legs so she could scoot over that device to us." And Clara would be like, "No, this new one's obviously a lot more annoying and aggressive to me." And, you know, that was in the middle of, like, a high-stakes scenario. But here we get, like, in resolution, Ryan and his dad sit down in a cafe and just talk with no immediate threat. Or here, the astronaut's husband and Graham just sit down and, you know, the husband gives his characterization speech. Well, you know, there's no immediate threat. It's like, yeah, they get really separated in a weird way, and it is a subtle thing. You don't notice it that much until it's brought up to you, but you're definitely right, Gig. It's very present.
That example you gave was really weird to me as well, between Graham and Jake, because Jake is presented as someone who is a bit closed off, and even right before that scene, he says, "I don't do feelings," or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And then he says everything. He spills his heart out to Graham.
You can't just have characters announce how they feel. That makes me feel angry.
Yeah, so basically he can't go see his husband go into space, but he's perfectly fine divulging his life story to a total stranger, basically. I think there must be just some sort of, like, unspoken bond between, you know, these masculine, like, blokes in Doctor Who, just sort of having, like, a heart-to-heart. I don't know. Graham has the way of just getting people to spill to him. Like, maybe that's the thing.
Again, I have a suspicion it might be a bit low demanding on purpose.
Yeah, probably.
It's because it's like what I did watch of season 11. I often had in another tab, and I basically got the same experience I would have otherwise, you know. So I think people have talked about, like, you know, it's the Netflix age. Like, it might be slightly rigged to be watched with the expectation that somebody's doing something else.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Yeah, this is. Yeah, Gig, I think, coined the visual big finish.
I did not coin that term. I did a whole thing about it as it relates to series 11, particularly with the Ghost Monument, because it's a big thing in Chibnall's era to basically, like, not show you stuff, but basically have stuff that you can follow by hearing it alone. And it's kind of disappointing and depressing to see that it's metastasizing and getting, I'd say, even more intense in series 12. Not all the time, but certainly this episode is a huge example. It just doesn't stop. Like, I can't remember an episode of series 11 where it was quite this relentless.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting because I've, like, had like, if I've recommended a film to my mum or something, she might ask, "Oh, is this something I can watch while ironing and folding the clothes, or do I, like, need my eyes lasered onto it for 100% of the screen time?" And, like, you can answer that because, you know, there are some films where you can say, "Oh, you know, it's a comedy, so it's the humor's mostly in the dialogue. It's shot reverse shot. You know, you don't really need to be looking at it the whole time." Or it might be like a Malick film, and I'm like, "No, you got to the visuals of the whole thing. You got to be staring at it." And it's like, this era is absolutely you can't just be folding the clothes. Like, you can be blind and you'll be totally fine.
But that's good. That's accessible. Chris Chibnall's woke.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's really a great move, ultimately, because he's helping people. and making it more accessible, as Ford says. Yeah.
See, the thing is,
so who are we to judge?
I think the whole the making it more accessible, I think it's not just to people who aren't looking at the screen, but I think also people who aren't paying any attention at all, because I noticed that with this exposition you've also got the Doctor repeatedly reminding you of whatever's just happened over and over again. Like, you know, it feeds into the whole jumping from place to place as well, because whenever the Doctor turns up to meet a new set of characters, she has to catch them up on whatever just happened in the last setting. Like, okay, we found an astronaut in we found a seaman in Madagascar and he blew up, and now we've got an astronaut who's sick, and now there's birds falling out of the sky in Peru, and oh god, it's mind numbing. It really does feel like you're just being whacked over the head again and again and again with stuff that you already got the first and the second times. It's exhausting. It's genuinely a bit exhausting.
Yeah, that gives rise to two thoughts with me, unlike the episode, and that's one. You know how we were talking infantilization of Ryan? It's like infantilization of the audience.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, it's making things easier for them to deal with. Like, I don't think anyone could possibly say, like, this is more engaging to watch than, like, a Matheson or a Moffat script. I mean, you can like it more, certainly. And I'm sure people could argue it's more engaging. But I feel like to do that, you would need to draw a lot more out of the episode than you would with a Matheson one. And that's because I feel like the takes, as you could say, like the analyses, like the articulated positions and themes and whatnot of these sorts of episodes have way more onus on the audience to create them, to construct them. Like that thing we were saying about, the virus and queer theory connections and all that. You can make that take, but to do that, you've got to do a lot of the legwork. Whereas you look at something like, what's some rich Moffat episode?
For Heaven Sent? Sorry, the obvious example.
You look at that and you don't need to draw out like a huge tapestry of like connections there, because like right in the episode already there are, lots of complicated themes. There's a lot of stuff going on. You look at Kill the Moon, like you don't need to like make a huge strained or contrived take to, justify something deep being there. Like there's enough to decode that's already there, like by itself. And I feel like that's a really interesting change. It's like, of course you can always do 5,000 words on, any of these episodes across 12 series, but with some of them, the episode's already going to provide you with a lot to, come away with. And then on others, you are going to be doing most of the legwork to make something apply to it. Does that make sense? Do you think I'm justified there?
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
One defense I keep seeing for Chibnall's era, or type of defense, is it doesn't do thing that Moffat did, or doesn't do thing that Russell T Davies did, because there's a lot of things that it doesn't do. And I think a lot of the people who are saying that they really like it, it just annoys them less than other eras that do things that bug them, if that makes sense. I don't know if they actually are getting anything from it.
It's less in general, for better or worse. Yeah, it's like subtractive, and you can totally say that's a good thing, like that's a position, but I think it's a real uphill climb to say this is an additive era, or this is, adding a lot to the show. Well, I mean, there's always like the behind the camera things of like the hirings, but in terms of like the scripts, yeah, I think it's very difficult to say there's more in them.
It seems to me like you have to enter some sort of hallucinatory, magical thinking, free association zone for Chibnall's run to come off as a source of any particular meaning at all. Like we saw it with back with It Takes You Away. We had Doctor Who TV.co.uk's kind of this is brave lesbian representation because of the frog, and 13 does some slightly seductive faces to a frog woman. That means it's a brave moment of representation for lesbians. And I just want to point out that review was written by a man, yeah? And now we're seeing it again, I think, with all over the place, like not just with this episode, but, with various things. I think it's weird. Like there's this genre, I think, of kind of trying to come up with ways to enjoy the show and kind of lowering the bar a lot. Like, okay, in this episode, you've got a gay couple and one of them watches the other succumbing to a virus and it's all really feelsy and stuff. Oh my God, it's about HIV. This is deep. Oh my God, this is so fucking deep, man. This is crazy. Yeah. And like, it's sort of like, it's so crude, I think. Like this, you sort of, okay, well, we've made this connection between two things that might vaguely vaguely be suggested as linking in some completely different context, this means that the episode has locked on to some genius, connection, and making some great statement about the gay experience. And it's like, well, to a certain extent, I think you're kind of bullshitting, right? And I think...
Well...
What were you going to say?
No, you finish your thought.
Okay. I think basically this whole practice, I think, of divining elaborate meanings and meaning craft around something like Chibnall Who, as much as I want to just say, well, okay, fine, do your thing, do you, it's fine to like things. At the same time, I kind of despair at the thought of having to endure this wave of criticism that's just gushing over these like these stories like they're Heaven Sent or Kill the Moon or Amy's Choice or something. These stories that are just so, I think, on the face of them, so fundamentally vacuous. I really just, I don't know, is it actually a good thing to be, pumping out these defences and these valiant defences of this slop,
Well, I'm going to be one of these people. So I'm going to, don the devil's advocate hat.
Okay.
Argue that I think it's a lot of smart people and, well-spoken people and articulate people that do this. And I think it's a valid intellectual exercise to do it. And not even that they're like approaching it that way cynically, but I think, I just watched this thing. What could it mean? I'm going to try and draw together the symbols and some kind of map of meaning. Like, I think that's valid. And that's something plenty of like smart people do, and they do it smartly. But that's the devil's advocating. But I'm fundamentally just so much less interested in that than... Is it too cynical to say that it's kind of soulless to do that, or it doesn't feel like it's coming from the heart so much? Because I see people do it, and they're trying to do it to like align it with their positions. Like, a gay man can write that saying, this episode spoke to me as a gay man because of this, and this, which I'm drawing together into like a tapestry of a very clever narrative.
The thing about that is, like, I don't want to shit on someone saying that the episode spoke to them on some personal level, because, at the end of the day, like, that's fine, isn't it?
Yeah,
but
exactly.
At the same time, it's like, just because you feel something doesn't necessarily mean it's a meaningful, relevant point. Sometimes a feeling is just a feeling. I don't want to sound like a beat boop kind of Redditor on that point.
I think maybe on some level people are just trying to like Doctor Who.
Yeah.
I think that makes me sound very patronising.
Where it starts bothering me though is like, it's all very well to bat out ideas and takes like that in the marketplace of ideas, and their takes are as valid as mine, and people will agree with one more, they'll disagree with one more, that's all fine. But I feel like there's a point where it stops being theoretical, and it's like the people saying this is, more than enough, and this is great, and this is doing X, Y, and Z, when they get heard more, it means that's seen as what's good enough. And like, it's a slippery slope. Like, what's that thing where like, it's like the whole centrist fallacy, like you keep veering more to one side, and it's like the middle shifts. It's like the Overton window of quality is shifting. I said earlier, back in 2017, we had Bill. And doesn't that seem like ages and ages gone now, when in this one we're like cheering over, an LGBT person didn't die? Like, does this not, like, and people can do their takes about how this is super clever, or they can make some amazing, essay about it. But I feel like there's a point where you have to step back and look at, what's very tangibly changed, and go like, is it, what exactly is it? Am I ridiculous to like say it might be slightly unethical at some stage to keep liking the show and justifying its supposed brilliance in that way?
I feel like that point is like the end point of Who Cares as a podcast. Like, you've summed up the whole theory there. It's unethical to like Doctor Who. Like, I'm completely on board with that theory, personally. I think, because at the end of the day, like, to a certain extent, but it's fans, they're having fun. But also, I think whenever you're a fan having fun on the internet and gushing about a show, or doing this about a show, and contributing to the attention economy around the show, you're kind of working for the show in this weird abstract way.
And that includes us. So I'm not saying people don't do it, but you're right. Yeah, any discussion about it is promotion. That's okay. But then there's the level of like saying, "Oh, this is more than enough," and I'm like, like, there's people I like that, write these takes, and they're very smart and everything, but I'm just like, on like a structural level, I'm kind of disquieted about the trend. And I think at some stage, I feel like we all have to kind of pinch ourselves and go, no, what's actually going on when we stop, if we stop reading into it and we just look back, like, look at what's changed, look what you're actually getting, look at, like, the numbers of X type of characters who die, like, it's not enough just to cast certain people.
I will say, I feel like it would be a bit unbalanced if we didn't bring this up, but apparently this episode has the first romantic man-on-man kiss on screen in Doctor Who. I think that seems to be the thing. So that's one thing that you could maybe legitimately credit to the episode, to be fair.
It's so frustrating to me because it's like that, and then the first woman of colour Doctor cast last week, and I can't deny these things, and I want to celebrate these things. It's like last week I was reckoning, with how I hate being the person being critical here. I hate disliking, the show, so to speak. But it's like, I feel like if you put on the glasses from They Live, and look at the context of these things happening, it's not enough. These are like isolated moments that it's really easy to write Radio Times articles about, and like people do get huge amounts of genuine emotion from them, and that's great, but you're owed more than scraps.
I mean, that's something I worry about, like with the They Live comparison there, because like not only does what you're watching feel unsubstantial, what you've got to say about it, even if critical, feels a bit unsubstantial.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, even like trying to talk about it and find ways to kind of bash it for this and that. It's like it's flogging a dead horse almost. Like, as every successive episode goes on with kind of Chibnall's same old kind of hack tactics or whatever getting reused, you kind of start to run out of meaningful insights.
Yeah, this episode's got us awfully existential. Are we intellectualizing it too much, or do you think all that like Overton window stuff really is like something occurring in like the what do you call it, fandom economy, attention economy, and like take generation and general audience reception?
I think at the end of the day, I think the sort of hyper praising takes around like the show, I think that's more of a niche bubble thing that's not really dominating the wider conversation. I think the wider phenomenon is just a case of generally people being a bit submissive to the content that they're given in general. And I think, people are inevitably going to slide to the path of least resistance and kind of being like, well, this is fine, this will do. And, that's not like some horrible moral atrocity. It's just kind of, it can be disappointing and kind of annoying.
Well, I think within the fandom there has definitely been a shift in the Overton window of what is acceptable LGBT representation. So I don't think you could say it's not there. It's just a question of whether this is just within Doctor Who or whether Doctor Who is still having any cultural impact at all. It was
hilarious actually. After last episode, there was some boomer going about how with their 8-year-old grandchildren watched Jack kiss Graham and they were like, horrified, and she had to explain to them why a man would kiss another man. It's like, this is where we are in 2020. Like, after all the work, it's like we've barely made any progress. Oh dear.
This is like the nuance of it is like, it would be very simple binary oppositions if there was just a group of people saying this woke stuff's bad and then a group of people saying this woke stuff's good. But it's like so much more complicated. It's, camps like us, which are more like saying this isn't enough. It's like the larger question. It's not that casting Ruth is bad. It's not that couple survive is bad. It's that there should be more. And it's frustrating to see people so overjoyed with this. And I don't want to feel like Scrooge here, but it's like, yeah, maybe Ford's right, and it's just hard for us at this stage to understand liking the show.
Was the fact that the gas mask people turned out to be boring generic humanoids, was that meant to be a clever subversion? Because we were thinking they'd be sea devils the whole time. We were praying they'd be sea devils, and they weren't. Oh, I want the sea devils.
Was that this is a completely different topic now, but was that the first episode to really go to South America, Sub-Saharan Africa and East Asia for a meaningful period of time in the new series? Because it seemed like that, but I might be missing things or forgetting things.
Quite possibly.
Pretty sure for the new series. Yeah.
That's maybe the one positive of this whole global thriller thing. We at least get to go to different locations, but the problem is, they're all crammed together into one episode, so you barely get to spend any time there. It's like, you just get them all out of the way.
It's just another one of those Chibnall things, like you write those down, those dot points, like the first writers of colour, the first woman doctor. The first episode set there, and it sounds great, and they are great. Everything surrounding them is not great, and I want more great things.
What did you guys think of the music in this episode? Because there was that bit near the start where they were filming the travel vlog, and there was that weird pop song, that pop song sounding thing that came on for about 10 seconds and sounded very insistent until it was just gone again. Like, there's some interesting choices, weren't there? Also, the bit in the shop when Jake was chasing the shoplifter, the percussions, it sounded a lot like Mombasa from the Inception soundtrack. That stuck out to me, sorry.
I think, like, I'll need someone else to reality check me here. Probably Gig, as you've seen my Sagan play counts on Spotify. But, I feel like there's maybe like a musical Overton window or Stockholm Syndrome even in that, like, I'm a big apologist for Sagan, and like, I enjoy his stuff. So I certainly enjoyed all that stuff you mentioned. I can't remember, like, would I have enjoyed this in 2017? Like, I enjoy the Sagan stuff now. It's like, have I been brain slugged for this one aspect of the show?
I will say, I don't think you have, because you complained about the new Jack Harkness theme, didn't you? When Sagan introduced that. Yeah, you were bashing him for that.
Well, that's because the whole point of a theme is that it stays the same. That's what it's for, to have the association with the character. You can't just do a new one, especially when the character's only in one scene in the season. It's the most ridiculous thing. There's such odd musical storytelling, as well as using the master theme to introduce Ruth. That's just trolling people. That's just, I'm going to play the wrong bit of music, you know? Oh, and then we'll play the right one. Like, this isn't...
It doesn't really matter, because no one noticed until Sagan tweeted about this stuff. But it's like, you know, I mean, one wonders, like, what's going on in the composing suite, you know, with these decisions.
Yeah, you're right. I must be sane, because I have criticisms of how he uses the music, but I like the music itself in isolation most of the time. I
just realised we're going to get the Series 12 soundtrack before Series 10's.
We're going to get the Series 13 soundtrack.
Well, that's if we get a Series 13 soundtrack, or a Series 13. Who knows?
I'm confident this team will be around at least through Series 15.
Series 13 will be in 2025, and then the soundtrack will be 2026.
The big rumours at the moment are that, like, the show's going to be retired at the 60th anniversary or in its current form, and then we'll get a reboot as, like, with Netflix or something.
That's just a projection of fandom fears. I don't think that has any basis in reality. But you might well be laughing at me in a few years for saying that.
Yeah, maybe.
It sounds horribly true. I'll just say that. It sounds horribly, horribly like something I've been conditioned to expect.
I think we're very used at this point to just things being worn down and kind of gutted of all their soul and uniqueness by the system over time. And to a certain extent, you could say that Doctor Who's time has been coming for a while. Like, you know, one day or another day, its number will be up, you know? And it's like, we're weirdly lucky to have it for so many years before it gets, you know, fucked over like everything else. So, you know, enjoy it while you can, or rather, enjoy it while you could, or whatever.
I don't pray for cancellation or anything, but like the last one, there were some pretty good books.
Yeah, some pretty good books. A few good audios as well, you know, until the audios went to shit too.
I feel like it's the Torchwood thing, you know, where we got 4 seasons, so even I'm a mega fan, I'm totally content with it ending. Like, we're getting 12 series, you know, at this point, up 12 plus 26 if you want to get expansive about it. Like, I don't think it's some doomsday scenario for something to stop getting produced. And I don't think as many people feel it is now. But in any case, I don't think the show's going anywhere for years. Well, I think it'll go away for years in terms of gap years. But in the long run, I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's too valuable a brand and too cheap to make.
They said the same about Top Gear. So, you know, what scandal would sink Doctor Who?
Well, the truth about Chaos in Cardiff got out, you know.
Well, it did.
Well, I mean, some of it did, but we don't know the full truth.
Only the full truth.
Better written.
Pillar of Hope.
Better written. Very cliche. Better written.
Pillar of Hope.
Better written. Very cliche. Better written.
Pillar of Hope.
Better written. Very cliche. Better written.
Pillar of Hope.
Better written. Very cliche. But I still felt that story was fairly boring.
That's all this year is. You don't even have to watch it in order.
Better written. Very cliche.